Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin may be cooking up the development deal of the century involving the Arctic and Eurasia. That's why the UK and the Europeans and Zelensky are not invited anywhere near the Alaska meeting. Check out this Guardian article. Path to peace cannot be decided without Ukraine, says Europe. That's typical of the fuselage which appeared over the weekend. The reason they're screaming is not just about the end of their evil war, which has killed millions. It's not even about ceding Ukrainian territory based on the war's present on-the-ground realities. The big thing which terrifies them is the major back-channel discussions between Trump and Putin. Donald Trump's choice of Alaska for the summit gives you the biggest clue about what they're really afraid of. I'm Barbara Boyd, and I have followed the reasons the British Empire has been at war with both Trump and Putin ever since 2015. So today, I'm going to first show you the historical background to this weekend's lunatic freakouts about the mere whiff of a settlement of the Ukraine war. Then I'm going to tell you things about the historical relationship between the United States and Russia, which terrifies the empire, and why joint U.S.-Russian development of the Arctic could launch a worldwide economic renaissance. Finally, I'll show you key developments in the Russiagate investigation, which again all lead back to London. Before I dig in, if you follow these videos and are learning from them, please like and subscribe to this YouTube channel now. I'll start with this quick social media summary as to why peace now is God's plan, despite the frantic efforts to sabotage or stop it.
I mean, you were in the room in 2018 in Helsinki when this happened. What do you make of the fact that Putin has now been invited to Alaska?
Well, it's very gracious of Putin to come to former Russian America for this summit. This is not quite as bad as Trump inviting the Taliban to Camp David to talk about the peace negotiations in Afghanistan, but it certainly reminds one of that. The only better place for Putin than Alaska would be if the summit were being held in Moscow. So the initial setup, I think, is a great victory for Putin. He's a rogue leader of a pariah state, and he's going to be welcomed into the United States. Second, I have a feeling this is sliding very quickly in Russia's direction. We're not quite back at February the 28th in the Oval Office when Trump told Zelensky, you don't have any cards. But what's happening is that Russia and the United States are discussing what terms they're going to present to Zelensky. And it may well be that Zelensky has no choice here. Surrendering is always one way to get a peace deal. And it seems to me, you listen to Trump talking about how things are progressing, that even without the meeting, Putin's got his old magic back with Trump, and all that disappointment, all that outrage, so on and so forth. Now you're talking about a deal between Trump and Putin. Think of the press that will get. I have to say, from the strategic perspective, from the U.S. interest perspective, this was not a good day.
Or you might remember this. It's one of my favorite Donald Trump moments, telling it like it is.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that. Remember this. You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel.
Right now, Trump and Putin will meet in Alaska without any third parties, including Vladimir Zelensky. A Trump meeting with Zelensky and a possible three-way meeting will come later. The Europeans and Zelensky are screaming about this. They say it's a new Yalta, just like what Franklin Roosevelt and Joseph Stalin did, they say, in carving up the world after World War II. As usual, they're lying. Franklin Roosevelt's post-war goal was to end the British Empire. For him, that was the only way to stop future wars. Here's how Elliot Roosevelt, FDR's son, described a fight between Roosevelt and Churchill during the war in his book As He Saw It. Elliot Roosevelt says this drove Churchill apoplectic.
I am firmly of the belief that if we are to arrive at a stable peace, it must involve the development of backward countries, backward peoples. How can this be done? It can't be done, obviously, by 18th century methods. Now,
who's talking 18th century methods?
Whichever of your ministers recommends a policy which takes wealth in raw materials out of a colonial country, but which returns nothing to the people of that country in consideration. 20th century methods involve bringing industry to these colonies. 20th century methods include increasing the wealth of a people by increasing their standard of living, by educating them, by bringing them sanitation, making sure that they get a return for the raw wealth of their community.
You mentioned India.
Yes, I can't believe that we can fight a war against fascist slavery and at the same time not work to free people all over the world from a backward colonial policy.
Now, when John Bolton was trotted out to announce the summit yesterday, he was completely fixated on the location. He said inviting Putin to former Russia-America, namely Alaska, is not quite as bad as inviting the Taliban to Camp David, but it certainly reminds one of that. And right there, the possible future joint venture role of Russia and the United States in Arctic economic development is what is at the center of the current imperial fit. If that happens, their entire post-war order is kaput. Trump's choice of Alaska for the summer was not lost on the Russians. Alexander Bobrov's article in RT points out that Alaska was part of the Russian Empire until 1867. Tsar Alexander II sold it to the United States to keep it from falling into the hands of the British Empire. During World War II, Fairbanks was the center of the massive U.S. effort to supply the Soviet Union with aircraft, equipment, and material to defeat Hitler. Bobrov also alludes to Russian and U.S. collaboration in developing the Arctic. That is the long-held dream by patriots in both countries, and it starts with a 54-mile tunnel under the Bering Strait, joining Alaska and Russia. My mentor, Lyndon LaRouche, began campaigning for this tunnel project all the way back in the 1970s. He foresaw what is happening now. Siberia, the Arctic, and northern Canada are the world's largest treasure trove of undeveloped resources. A land route between the United States and Russia allows the transport of these riches throughout both continents and beyond to Eurasia. In Russia, the idea was supported by the great Russian scientist Dmitry Mendeleev after he returned from the Philadelphia Centennial Exposition of U.S. economic might in 1876. The U.S. had just defeated Lord Palmerston's scheme to destroy us, namely the Civil War. The whole world wanted to emulate our feat. In the United States, George Kennan the Elder is the first known advocate of joint U.S.-Russian development across the strait. Former Alaska Governor Walter Hickel was also a big supporter. A real estate man like Donald Trump, Walter Hickel believed, like Trump, that big projects are the alternative to war. Right now, other nations see the enormous economic potential in the Arctic, with China and NATO's Sweden and Finland trying to muscle in on what has been to date a shared Russian and American dream development. It should stay that way. And its beauty is that it can evade Europe and the British entirely. According to the Wall Street tip sheet, Undervalued Shares, there have been explicit discussions of this development at Mar-a-Lago, which involved the potential for using Elon Musk's Hyperloop for the project. Will this happen? I don't know, but it should. It would be the sweetest payback for Russiagate and the war. The potential for it to happen, allowing the United States and Russia to become the economic engine of the world, has sent the British imperialists into their current pearl-clutching fit. At the same time, the walls are closing in, to cite an infamous phrase, on the Russiagate gangsters. But justice won't come unless the British imperial hand in this is exposed and punished, and their strategic goal is exposed. Mike Benz keeps emphasizing that the goal of the Ukraine war was ultimately to seize Eurasia, and there was Donald Trump's opposition to that plan, which caused Russiagate. Let's listen to Mike Benz.
The Atlantis' foreign policy faction's goal is to seize Eurasia from Russia and using U.S. taxpayer funds to fund that war. And if Americans decide, you know what, we want to focus on ourselves, we want to build our own roads, we want to be able to have affordable housing, affordable health care, we want to be able to build our own beautiful kingdom. And what's happening in Eurasia is basically for the benefit of a bunch of oil and gas companies and a bunch of military contractors and a bunch of Chamber of Commerce companies that don't even have their manufacturing here anymore. And while that fragile quasi-military, quasi-political campaign is being waged, and we are in decade, I don't know, 7 of that, as long as that is the plan of the Atlantis foreign policy blob, Russiagate will always be here as the ghost hanging over everyone who wants to focus on our own domestic priorities because of the dirty trick power of being able to use a FISA-type power, a foreign-facing dirty trick power, in order to knock out a domestic political opponent who is undermining support for that Atlantis foreign policy blob. And so they're intricately interconnected. The internet censorship apparatus in this country was established through Russiagate. And then once Russiagate basically, temporarily died in the summer of 2019 with the Mueller probe having nothing to back it up, then they simply transitioned to a democracy predicate, which is the same foreign policy watchword used to overthrow governments.
In previous episodes, we've highlighted the roles of both London and Kyiv in the Russiagate coup. They, along with their U.S. toadies, tried to run a color revolution in the United States from 2016 through 2024, aimed at both Trump and Putin. That's the treason element of this. That's also the document trail, including everyone's relevant emails, which must be declassified now. Just take the case of FBI retired counterintelligence chief Alan Kohler as an example. He opened the classified documents Mar-a-Lago case against Trump. But he was also present for Russiagate's criminal beginnings in London with the CIA's Dina Haspel. Where is Kohler now? Well, at the Alperovitz Institute at Johns Hopkins University. The name Alperovitz may ring a bell. Dmitry Alperovitz co-founded CrowdStrike, the firm that made Russiagate possible by lying that the WikiLeaks documents trove from the DNC and John Podesta were the product of a Russian hack. He also played a major role in the Ukraine coup from the Atlantic Council, which brought us both the Ukraine war and Trump's first impeachment. So here's what they don't want you to understand about the summit. This isn't just about ending a war in Ukraine. This is about ending an entire world order that has kept humanity trapped in cycles of imperial resource extraction and manufactured conflict for over a century. The British Empire never died. After Franklin Roosevelt died, it just put on a three-piece suit and called itself the rules-based international order. The screaming you hear from London, Brussels, and their American assets isn't about Ukraine's territorial integrity. It's the death rattle of a parasitic system that has fed off human misery for generations. If America and Russia become partners instead of enemies, their game is over. I'm Barbara Boyd. The empire is dying and they know it. The only question is whether we'll help them dig their own grave or whether we'll let them drag us down with them. You won't find this real story about the background to the summit anywhere else but Promethean Action. If you go there now and subscribe or provide funding, we can continue to scoop everyone else about the political war Trump is waging. I'll see you again on Thursday when Susan Kokina and I will continue to answer your questions. Thanks very much for listening.
Please take a moment and subscribe to our free newsletter at PrometheanAction.com.